Warcraft and Nuzlockes, two things that probably never went together, until today. I'm going to explain how we're going to use the famous Pokemon difficulty rules to make WoW that much more interesting. If you're not sure what a Nuzlocke is, basically it's a set of Pokemon rules that restrict gameplay to make the game more difficult. In summary, any Pokemon that faints is out of the challenge, and only the first wild Pokemon can be caught in an area. This is the most basic understanding of it, so we're going to take this and put a spin on it in WoW's gameplay. There are some more difficult versions of this challenge, so I'm going to take that into account and craft a rule set based off of those as well. Here are the rules. We'll be going into each expansion treating it like a gym leader. Each one will have an item level restriction that progresses as the game moves forward. Any deaths will remove one slot of equipment, and if all equipment is lost before level 80, we will lose the challenge. No instance group content unless it's forced on the player. There will be no auction house or external help from groups, XP potions, items, or otherwise. War mode must be turned on by level 20, and there is no holding on to gear. Once it enters your bag, you need to use it or lose it. Finally, there will be no switching of specializations. Once locked in, you're stuck with that for the rest of the challenge. The goal is to get to level 80 and complete all of the current expansion main storyline quests in these 4 zones. And now that you're all caught up, let's get going. So level 1 to 10 has that classic WoW situation going on with an item level restriction of 6 to start with. After naming the character Void Stake, because I'll be honest, I thought it would have been taken, I line up some BOA gear and then get ready to push forward. Don't worry, this gear won't be here for long. The beginning of this product is something that works really well without having to do too much. We hit level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5 without having to do too much from the normal game. The restrictions of gear do start here, however, as our staff automatically hits item level 8, which forces it to destruction. Now for the first hurdle. Being a squealer might be cool in your bedroom, but for this guy, he'd have been better off finding a better name. He goes down with ease. Of course, once we hit level 6, the rest of the BOA gear comes off, having hit past the item level restriction. It's all gone, but we do manage to get a pair of shoes for all of the armor lost. It's time for Mulgore proper. Level 7 comes after setting up quest, and at this point, it's time to face the next boss. All I'm going to say is that with a name like Fist Sprocket, you may want to get that checked out by a doctor. He goes down without too much of an issue as well. With his death, we can get to level 8 quickly, but once again, the item level restriction comes into play as this staff is too high an item for the current restrictions. By now, you're likely noticing the beginning of the challenge isn't too difficult. I could probably give this game to a new player, and they could probably do this with slightly less speed and still be okay. Pulling several mobs at a time is a viable strategy here, and to save some of that time, I'm going to try to keep this until the restriction becomes too much. Speaking of which, we're about to raise the restriction a little as level 9 and level 10 are reached with a cascade of quests. We're going to be playing in Shadow Spec for this run, and once selected, this will be the only specialization we'll play for the duration of this challenge. It's time to fly to Orgrimmar, set up Chromie to prop us into the Outlands, and set up our Hearthstone for the city. We'll be doing this for pretty much the rest of the game. Once I arrive in Hellfire, the new restrictions come into effect. Any item that is 37 or lower is now available to be used. I waste no time getting the initial weapon that most expansions seem to start you off with when you touch down. Of course, this game is still easy, allowing me to take down multiple foes with ease at this point. With this in mind, I slide my way into level 11 and level 12 without too much issues. Along the way, I get a new hat and robes to slightly boost my stats, and even get lucky with a pair of pants that upgrade just underneath the restriction. This isn't the last time an equipment piece upgrades, and honestly, you'll see that this is both a blessing and a curse. Level 13 comes and goes without too much of a hassle, and now we're approaching a fight with Warbringer Assmuncher. That is definitely his name. Don't look at the screen to verify it. We get to level 14 at this point, but this level marks the end of getting equipment from quest drops. However, item drops like rings and shoulders can still happen so long as they're under the item level threshold, so they're fair game. We get another boss fight going in Black Panther. Blizzard foresaw the movie more than a decade before it came out and put homage to it in this zone. Unfortunately for him, Void Stake is just too much for the future movie. With this gone by, level 15 and level 16 are complete in no time at all. But if you thought this product was going too well, the game would agree with you. In one of my big pull attempts, I end up running into mobs that have a potent attack, and before I know it, I go down with a ship for my first death of the run. As a result, I'm forced to remove my shoes and go with only hooves for the rest of the run. Zalatath will be proud, but I'm not certain Only Cows has become an expansion yet, so we'll have to wait for the jury to decide if this is good or not. We do hit level 17 though, and with that, we're now ready to shift into the new expansion. With a Hearthstone done and Chromate Talk 2, we land ourselves in Howling Fjord, ready to get into the 20s with a new item level restriction of 84. Rather, Lich King starts us off with a bang, giving us level 18 with some new gloves to work on. Not long afterwards, we get a new helmet to replace the one from Outlands. We then pick up a necklace, solidifying to some extent that we're at least pushing the restriction as much as possible. As a result, level 19 goes by without much of an issue, and we pick up one more ring from a corpse while invading an alliance base. We're able to snag a one-hander from a quest, hit level 20, and go into war mode. This effect is of course a double-edged sword, as while we can get more experience points, we're also at the mercy of other players who probably have more equipment than us. Back in the fjord, we get yet another ring, and I show you all if I've learned my mistakes from Hellfire. The answer, by the way, is no, so I'll keep doing stuff like this until it becomes outright impossible. Level 21 is mission accomplished, and just for the hell of it, I decide to fight an elite to see how much equipment gains have helped me out. You're not supposed to fight this guy one-on-one, but I figured it'd be faster because Bjorn Hold My Hand is weak to the masculine cowman like Voidstake. He goes down. And my reward is a new belt for starting the next round of Smackdowns with. Of course, we will have another boss fight, but I won't even finish the sentence before he's dead, so it's not worth mentioning. This nets me level 22, and the conclusion of getting equipment at this point in levels until the new restriction raises. Level 23 comes and goes, and we get one last big boss fight before the end of this expansion's run. Honestly, the restriction being so high here helped out and gave us a chance to catch back up on some of the footing because Drake's son isn't able to get nearly the level of fame his father got, even with all his homies backing him up. Level 24 marks the end of Wrath of the Lich King, and it's time to head to the next expansion. Unfortunately, you can't start Cataclysm zones until you're level 40, so we'll be heading to Pandaria instead. Deal with it. Waking up on a crashed boat, the only good news is that we have a new restriction starting at 118. However, there's not as much space in between this as the previous one, so this could start to get a little rough. Of course, we have a token weapon ready for us, and this thing will start our desperate push to stay relevant as the levels get higher. But of course, as I was feeling good about this challenge, I learned that not all hits are equal, and before I know it, my health hits 0, and I'm dead again for the second time around. This time, it cost me my gloves, so apparently Voidstake must be a stripper name because we're starting off with the least offensive clothing. Who'd have thought? We get to level 25, then level 26 without upgrades, and eventually we face off against Conk the Conko Puffs. Since we're not allowed to say monkey anymore, I'll just call this enemy Conked and moved on. We do get to acquire one more piece for our troubles, and now it's time for a boss rush. First off, this Dwarf Death Knight who is probably wishing he had an actual raid buff. The reality is I took this guy as seriously as I take Moonguard as a server. Not a threat at all. Next, there are two gnomes, plus and derp and Minded Swing. Their attacks, I admit, did actually hit my health bar a lot more than I anticipated, but once one of them went down, the other wasn't as volatile, and the fight became more controlled. After them was Captain Jack Sparrow, and he probably would have been tough if you didn't know that hiding behind a wall stops bullets in this game. But he doesn't get much of an opportunity to plunder booty here, and dies to the cow that got away from Outback. I do get one more level in, reaching 27 before facing the final boss of the rush forward. Captain Dorito can actually be potentially deadly here if you have to deal with him for too long, but we're well equipped enough to stop him from reaching his second phase and can move on as the snack that smiles back. My reward is getting one more higher item level piece, that's right at the restriction cap, but of course that means hitting level 28 stops any further opportunity to garner equipment for the time being. Thankfully, the game makes up the pun for me in this last boss battle, as Duke Ukum throws barrels and is an elite monster of a Hosen. It's just a shame that he's not too strong, and so the Thanksgiving turkey is saved for now. We cruise through level 29 and then level 30, finishing up our time in Mop and going backwards to Cataclysm. With the new restriction being at 164, we can once again work up to recover some of the gear we've struggled with up until this point. Let's start with the robes. Getting another set once more certainly helps move things forward. We also get lucky with another level upgrade on a belt and replace what we got back in Wrath. And here we are again with a well-tokened weapon. Each expansion has one, and this is no exception. This also gives us level 31, and we hit level 32 shortly afterwards. We then get a neck piece as a drop reward for extra security, but this is where problems occur. I'm getting repeats on equipment like another belt, and not getting good items to replace some of my poor equipment that I've had since the beginning. At least here, I also get level 33. Still, it's not stopping us just yet, as our next fight is Lysanderoth, and though he exists as a menace in a Pokemon game, here he's just masquerading as a god amongst Worgen. So I guess in a sense he's filling the same role, and just like in the other case, he dies here too. Afterwards, we get a quick surge to level 34, get one more helmet for the road, hit level 35, and have another boss battle, this time against Schindler's List. It's not really a contest, as the boss proceeds to stun us 2 times and then eventually goes down. The worst part about this was honestly the immune section that he had at the start. There is another battle on this plane too, but it's just a therapy session gone wrong, so let's move on. After hitting level 36, we get another restriction hit where at this point we're no longer going to be able to get upgrades. But the good news is that we have one more boss fight against Blanchie, who now identifies as a bird and goes caw. Despite picking up a burger for a meal tonight, she ends up on the grill as Void Steak cooks her to death. This leads to level 37 and a completion of our time in Cataclysm, moving on to the next spot in Warlords of Draenor. Once again, upon landing in a new zone, the restriction comes up, but unlike last time, it's not going to be nearly as high, going up to 187 from 164. Remember how we were getting lucky with upgrades? Well, that comes to haunt us here, as the first upgrade pushes the item just high enough to where the default weapon we get isn't accessible for use anymore. And while we do manage to sneak in one more pair of pants before we hit level 38, this point marks the spot where we will no longer gain any more gear because of the restrictions. And so we eventually push level 39 and have a short boss rush. Ungalo is first, and despite the restrictions, we managed to garner enough equipment to at least not take a long period of time taking her down. Taskmaster Garfield comes up next, and though he might hate Mondays, I'm not going to be a part of his lasagna, so he too gets wrecked by the awesome powers that be. And finally, we've got Kilgore, and this is a good time to mention Shadow Priest is absolutely wrecking this situation. Yes, admittedly, the gear we've gotten helps a bit, but I do think the class abilities are really playing a strong role in our success so far, and I'm kind of surprised at how well it does in the grand scheme of things. In any case, we get level 40, fight another boss and go try again, that does nothing, level up to 41, and then go fight Mr. Glug Glug. At least that's what he should be named because he sucks It doesn't take too long to complete the Warlords of Draenor opening credits and get to level 42, and we only need one more level before we're done here. And that comes quickly, so WoD is done as we get ready for Legion. Now that the shift is taking place, we will land with a new restriction of 231. You'll notice the level actually does go up a little bit here, but in terms of actual gear, well, Legion artifact weapons are a joke at this point as they start with a base item level of 10. Your all-powerful Xal'atath and a dagger basically has the same stats as a weapon back in Mulgore. Maybe a little bit stronger, but frosting here doesn't get any sort of protection with a weapon like that. Also, Legion does not drop any other weapons for obvious reasons, so there's that. Combined with the fact that we hit level 44 and level 45 before we really start in the zone, and it's really not looking good for new equipment. We do get a new headpiece from one of the quests as we also hit level 46, but the levels are moving quickly and getting to level 47 means we're closing in on the restriction spot already. I was hoping to get one more piece of equipment for killing Lily here, and by the way, this fight is also taking longer now because of the lack of gear spikes that are starting to catch up a little bit here. However, as I went to turn in the quest, the item level upgraded to epic quality, meaning it pushed itself out of my restriction range, causing me to settle for nothing on this quest. And unfortunately, beating the edgy demon hunter didn't do anything for me either, as despite the fight being relatively easy with someone soaking in damage for me, I ended up hitting level 48 and forcing the restriction cap to pretty much pass me by, giving me only one item in return. And so we press on, getting level 49, and then having another boss fight with a Naga commander. Honestly, this wasn't so bad, as despite the setbacks in gear, we're not too far off from some pieces, so we're still holding up fine for now. We do have one more big fight in Gilgamesh, but with some fear tactics and using a rotation as practiced, he eventually goes down as well. So with that success, we managed to hit level 50, ending our run in Legion and starting off with the terrible streak of expansions in WoW's history. BFA is next on our list, and while it isn't glamorous, it does offer quick levels and a new restriction cap of 253, only slightly higher than the previous cap out. In fact, after hitting level 51 and then level 52, with the exception of some pants, we've already capped for the rest of the expansion. And so the levels come quick. We hit level 53 without issues, then have a nice fight with Vagina to decide who is the better prophet. Spoilers, they're both wrong because I didn't heal the wounds. With that, we hit level 54, then level 55 once we arrive back in the city, followed by a boss rush of different enemies. It should be noted that although I'm sufficiently weaker at this point, the problem seems to be more time consuming than actually difficult. As mobs gain more health, I have less potent abilities to deal with them, but I can only imagine this will go on for so long before they'll start really decimating my health in combat. In any case, the next levels in 56 and 57 go by without much more of a debate, and we shift our focus from BFA to the worst expansion of them all, Shadowlands. And honestly, the hardest part here was sitting through this expansion, but at least the restriction is raised to 320, except when we hit level 58, we've already surpassed that restriction. So, yeah. May I introduce to you, everybody, Blob 1 as the first boss fight of Shadowlands. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm starting to feel that difference in gear. This fight took half a minute, which is probably not the way it's supposed to go. Now, I did lie a little bit. We didn't quite get past the restriction, but it felt like it because the legs I was supposed to get once I got to level 59 upgraded to 321, and that just goes to show you how the upgrade system for this is a double-edged sword. Time for another boss fight. We've got the Wind Serpent we killed back in Wailing Caverns, who overgorged on Anima. This fight wasn't as long as the previous one, but it still felt like an eternity for this point at the game. We hit level 60, and now it's time for another boss rush. Armando is our first target, and level 1 training protocols aren't anything special. At this point, bosses feel like sponges. Strapless didn't really have much either. It was just wearing down the mob slowly until it dies. For the record, I still don't have cloak, wrist, trinkets, or 2 pieces I lost in the gloves and feet earlier. Oedipus is next, and you gotta admit it's really creative having 3 enemies doing the same thing but with different health bars. This one surprisingly was the fastest of the 3, but not by much. Now we're getting to the good part. May I introduce to you Blob 2 as the next fight. The return of Blob the Builder disguised as my memory really triggered zero nostalgia in me. In fact, he went down easy outside of being a big old blob sponge. We hit level 62 and proceed to get into the next boss fight in Blob 3. I hate Shadowlands. Same story with this blob, he goes down easily. We hit 63 and I have one last boss fight in Lithuania. Since she's in execute range, we actually get a slight increase in damage, so she ends up being taken out relatively quick. After a short flight, we hit 64 and head back to Chromie, who by this point is probably wondering what kind of disorder we have to change the time wave so much. In any case, the penultimate expansion of Dragonflight is next on our radar, and honestly, while I'll probably end up bored here, at least it's not Shadowlands. Also, the restriction has been raised to 347, but when we hit level 65, we're going to be restricted again. We hit level 65. 66 and 67 without difficulty, and that means we move on to our first campaign boss in Meat Grinder Sarah. While I don't think she means to twerk like she ends up doing, I can say with confidence that she ends up living up to her name. Not in the way Blizzard intended, mind you, but in the other kind of meat grinding. You know what kind. I'm about to hit level 68 here, but before I do, I nearly die from the additional damage I'm taking. Without leveling up here, I might have actually died. The lack of gear has caused some possible side effects, and yet, because there isn't that much more boss fights, we do manage to hit level 69, and then level 70. And now it's time for the real difficult part of this challenge. When you go into the current expansion, everything is magnified up to a point, and the War Within is no exception to this problem. The good news is the restriction goes up to 515, which is all fine and well, but I have to get to that spot, and 2 Nerubian goons are enough to make this a problem. In fact, after this, I end up in an over 3-minute boss fight. The game is expecting your gear to have kept up at this point to some degree, but considering how little upgrades I've gotten since Warlords, I'm pretty much forced to just slog through this and pray I don't get additional mobs on top of the fight. Thankfully, Magni is taking this fight, but the sheer amount of time spent on this nonsense was actually the longest fight I'd have to deal with, and my reward was finally getting a neck piece. Hooray. At least the gains are moving quickly as I get a robe shortly afterwards to push my item level into triple digits. Oh yeah, I was basically sitting in the double digit numbers for item levels still prior to this moment. Now that we're in Khazalgar, we're going to have some encounters like this. Alliance looking to have a cut of the Tenderloin. Well, I won't let them. At least, not willingly. Unfortunately, I'm also unwillingly subjected to do a single delve as part of the storyline, and this fight goes on for over a minute as well. At least I was able to put Bran in tank specs, so this made the whole process a little easier, but the equipment needs an update as soon as I can get it. Thankfully, I get a little head out of the Delver's chest, followed by a new weapon upon returning to the village. This is where my fate of one at a time mob fighting would slowly change to a positive outlook, especially since level 71 also means I get my hero talents in Archon. Funny enough, I get an offhand to complement my one-hander from the quest earlier, and then another helmet to raise my stats that much more, giving me a near 200 item level. This does translate well when I get a boss fight in the mines for a quest, and I'm doing comfortable enough damage to where the fight only lasts 25 seconds in comparison to my previous battles. With all the quests, I managed to hit level 72 and move that much further to the end of the product. But if you thought it was going too easy, the Alliance seemed to agree, killing me quickly and forcing me to remove my second trinket from the equation. Thankfully, I wasn't wearing even one of these already, so it just amounts to an inconvenience in time. Next part is the Forced Dungeon, where you must complete the Rookery with AI to progress the storyline. The first boss is Big Bird, and the surprising amount of damage the followers do is more than enough to get this done in less than a minute's time. In fact, Big Dwarf even takes less time, and considering he's the reason we're here, you better believe this is more than enough to call him a disappointment in the eyes of all dwarves. Finally, we have the Void Stake Monstrosity, but after clipping his shield in short order, we kill him before he even gets a chance to go through his mechanic cycle, finishing the Rookery and earning ourselves another ring to equip. Back out in the overworld, we get one more pair of pants and then hit level 73, as well as complete the first main storyline in the Isle of Dorn. We do need to complete a couple more quests here, so I finally get the opportunity to wear a pair of bracers after turning in a quest. This only took me 72 levels to replace them. So let's celebrate by immediately losing another piece to a one-shot by a dunce in the open world. This time we're taking off a headpiece, which will no doubt reduce my damage by quite a bit. Nevertheless, we still do get to level 74 and can proceed with the wrap up of the Isle of Dorn side quest. I get a trinket from helping, what was it again? A ring from waking up the next apocalypse, and eventually we head down to the Ringing Deeps and get to work on a few more side quests, which gets me level 75. Now that we're in the latter half, I should mention we're right at the cap, so upgrading gear is more of a screw over at this point. And just as I figured, a ring didn't want to be a part of this product, so it upgrades just to deceive me. We get to our next storyline boss in Cogchewer, whose name is so stupid I don't have a better response for it. I will tell you, however, seeing that I've managed to garner enough equipment to take this thing down in less than 30 seconds brings me immense joy, as Void Stake is cooking from his previous levels. Of course, we get another boss fight not long after in Bickereeker, who does take a little bit longer due to his overshield, but eventually he goes down as well. This does net me a pair of shoulder pads, giving me my second to last piece of equipment, and also awards me with 2 more boss fights in Waximus and Drippy. Notice my bar is really close to leveling, and I am intentionally trying to hold off because this quest nets me 1 more item level upgrade, and if I can just get to the point where I can complete it, I'll get the opportunity for 1 more piece before the latter stages. Notably, both bosses go down without a hitch, and we can see what our fate is. Thankfully, Blizzard doesn't know what comedic timing is, so we get the staff without any problems as our final upgrade and our introduction to level 76. Stupid Blizzard. On to our next boss fight in Cool Bumcrack, and I'm not into this whole transformation nonsense going on here, so I decided to show the full fury of Shadow Priest and dump more void energy into the creature, overloading its circuits and taking it down. We do the same to Supervisor Varmint, taking care of business with ease as the scaling of gear that we have is about equal to what it should be at this point in time. After the longest scenario in WoW history, we are rewarded with another boss fight in Masturbator Tungsten, and while this fight does go on forever, I contributed more to his 2-phase battle than actual difficulty, so we move on from there as well. We get the Ringing Deeps main storyline done shortly afterwards, and a couple of stories about how Grandma got run over by a reindeer gets us to level 77. Next is Hollowfall, and you're probably going to notice that things get shorter from here because, like with a lot of games, it seems the further you go into zones, the less plot there is to tie it all together. We do still have to fight Siege Lord Zogosh, who has stopped being an orc and started being the thing that you smack when you see it on your screen, but eventually we get to level 78, and now we fight a Warlock's angry teenage Voidwalker. Remember kids, do not do steroids, otherwise you'll have a nightmare about Anduin Wrynn crying to you in your sleep. No one likes that. The final boss of Hollowfall's questline is Aelric Lead, who sniffed one too many toes and got himself involved in Xalatath on an intimate level. For his lack of self-control, I had to put him down. Guy was murdering people for feet pictures. This does wrap up our time in Hollowfall, and we move on to Ashkahet, netting our penultimate level with this side quest. Again, the final zone has even less going on with it leveling wise than its previous parts, so I'll try to focus on boss fights from here on. Tilly here was trying to smell more of the sauce, so after a few tendrils stopped up his nose, he goes down without issue. Eventually we get a pseudo scenario, and while there are boss fights to be had here, Anduin and Illyria are basically taunting the whole time, so I just get to free cast to take out the remaining fighters. As a result of this, we get to level 80, completing one half of the challenge and getting close to the other. 2 more quests in, and we can say that the Nuzlocke product is complete for Shadow Priest, and with a time of 13 hours and 11 minutes, as well as 4 death experiences, you too can age rapidly to the point of hanging out with the spiders.